He took drink well, but even he was feeling a bit woozy by around midnight. By 3 a.m, the pub was almost empty. He could no longer remember who he'd spoken to, so when a sad-faced man said hello, he nodded and went back to his beer. "Hello, Stuart," the man said again. His voice was soft. It had an amused tone, as if he knew more than other people, found something amusing. Stuart no longer worried how people knew his name. Plenty of them did. He rather liked the celebrity. He'd always enjoyed making connections with people all over. Stuart looked at him this time. "Do I know you?" he said. His teeth were bright, white and even, clearly false. His hair, pale blonde, sat flat on his head. He smelt strongly of aftershave, the kind Stuart used to smell wafting out of the cars while he waited for the bus. His mouth drooped. Sad man, Stuart thought. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay, bit tired." The man moved so that he could look directly into Stuart's eyes. Stuart froze. This was how the apparition in the cave had looked at him. With this intensity. He was used to people staring at him greedily, but this was something different. The sad face, the long arms, the long, long fingers. It was the apparition from the mine. The man's hand went out and grabbed Stuart by the wrist with a powerful grip. "Hold still, Stuart, this won't take long." Stuart shivered, feeling as cold as he had underground, chilled to the bone and dreaming of snow. "Let go, mate, would you?" he said, trying to pull back, but he felt deep lethargy, as if he'd been injected with golden syrup and his limbs couldn't move. The man raised his other arm and brought it up to pinch the bridge of Stuart's nose. Stuart was paralysed. He wanted one of the other drinkers to intervene, to hit the man, to knock him away, but no one did. It was so quiet, Stuart felt as if he was back in the mine, and the idea of it made him choke. No, it wasn't that. He had a nosebleed. Blood pouring backwards down his throat because the man held his sinuses too tight. He let go and Stuart slumped forward, spitting blood. He felt movement return. Turned his head away from the man. The man bent and helped him up. "Nosebleed, nosebleed. Make a bit of room, I'll take him and clean him up. Nosebleed, he'll be fine." Stuart tried to pull his arms away. His mouth was full of blood. "Come on, Stuart, it'll be all right." He led Stuart to the men's toilets, propped him up against the wall. Stuart heard a skittering sound, like cockroaches across the kitchen bench at midnight. He thought he caught a whiff of them, that slightly plasticky smell, a smell of sour cherries. "It won't hurt," the man said. Stuart felt the creatures, and by straining his eyes could watch them walking up his arm. The scream in his head deafened him. Up his forearm, his biceps, over his shoulders and onto his neck where he could feel them latching on. "It's not your blood they're taking," the man said. His voice was soft and almost too broad to listen to. "It's something else. You won't miss it. It'll be like it was never there. You won't know." He clicked his tongue and Stuart thought the sucking stopped. He felt lightheaded and nauseous. The man plucked a beetle off Stuart's shoulder and ate it. Crunched it like it was a nut, and then took the next. 2 more and he was smacking his lips. Stuart couldn't move. He felt so cold. He felt like he'd been buried in snow or was back in the cave. But it was light in here, very light. "Look at me." The man's cheeks were pink, his eyes bright. He looked younger, happy. "Thank you, Stuart. Have a good life." He tapped Stuart on the head and Stuart slept. He awoke on the filthy toilet floor. Someone had dropped a wad of shitty toilet paper and he could smell that. He felt a little compunction to rise, to lift himself. It was like this was the only moment and there was nothing beyond. Another man came in and helped him up. "Home time for you, mate. Wait here while I take a piss and I'll go get you a taxi." "Do I know you?" Stuart said. Things seemed blurred and he couldn't remember much. "Nah, but you'll always help someone in trouble, right? Especially a survivor like you." "I am a survivor," Stuart thought, as the stranger helped him to a taxi. "That's what I did." But he felt as if he could never do it again. He woke up on his lounge room floor, his shirt stiff with dried blood. "Big night, was it?" Cheryl said, poking him with her toe. Sarah stood over him, ready for school, her shoes all shined, her white socks folded neatly. He shivered, feeling cold. The long man pinched my nose. His face felt swollen and he knew he must look awful. "Get off the floor," Sarah said. "You're shivering." "I will soon." He felt a deep sense of pure lethargy. Cheryl helped him up onto the couch and brought him a cup of tea. "You're too old to drink like that anymore." Wasn't the drink. Well, I did have a bit of hiding, but it was this guy. This long grey guy who gave me a bloody nose and then did something to me. I'm tired. I'm so tired and cold. She brought him a pink fluffy blanket and covered his knees with it. "The TV producers sent over a copy of your interview. Sarah and I have already watched it twice. Want to have a look? You come across really well." She didn't wait for his answer but played the DVD anyway. He watched the interview over and over that day, wondering at the person talking. "Geez, I'm a smart ass, aren't I?" he said, smiling at his Cheryl. She kissed his forehead. "You always were." The lightness of her tone warmed him slightly. She had suffered postnatal depression and he was terrified every day it would come on again. He saw it behind her eyes sometimes, in the droop of her mouth, a wash of sadness. Those were the times he tried harder to lift her up. Out of the corner of his eye, he thought he saw a bug climbing the wall and he curled up, pulling the blanket over his eyes. "We need to get the rent-a-kill guys in here, get rid of the cockroaches," he said. She nodded. "Ants too, all over the kitchen, rotten little things." She sat beside him, laying her head on his shoulder. "I still can't believe you're back," she said. His little bird, his sparrow, but a tower of strength at the same time. Usually, sitting beside her, he felt something. Irritation, often, when she went on about small domestic details, none of which interested him. Boredom, talking about her family. Affection, when they sat together watching TV. Love, when they laughed together at a joke he'd made. When her eyes crinkled up and the tears formed. He loved those little tears. She held his hands. He let it lay loose. "Are you okay?" she said. "I just can't really feel anything. It's all gone numb." She stared at him. "We have to tell the doctor. Something's wrong. You shouldn't feel like that." "I don't feel anything, love. That's the thing. Nothing at all. Just cold. Like I've got an ice block inside my stomach." He didn't tell her he meant emotionally as well, that looking at her left him cold. To cover it up, he kissed her. Usually they'd do this stuff at night with the door closed, but he kissed her with passion and moved his hands around her body, touching all of his favourite bits. The weeks passed. He ate meals he had no real desire to eat, had conversations and many, many interviews. Sponsorships brought money in. Newspaper reports listed everything he'd eaten underground, and those people approached him. It was Vegemite, Tip-Top bread, Milo chocolate bars, apples. The local fruit shop took on that one. And the local butcher had a go too. The watch company put him on TV, talking about how he'd never need another watch, that one was so good. So at least he didn't have to work. People kept asking him if he was going back underground and he'd bluff at them, give them the real man answer, the hero stuff, but he wasn't going back. He spent a lot of time reading the paper. He started cutting out stories of other survivors, especially the ones who talked about the cold, about the deep bone chill they felt after a few days. "Dad, let me hook you up with an online forum. You can meet other survivors and talk to them. Most of them are probably feeling what you're feeling," Sarah said. He sat at the computer for a while, but it only made sense when she talked him through it, and he didn't want her to know it at all. She asked him about the long man. "The one you said pinched your nose. We should try and track him down and make sure he doesn't do it again. People can't go around pinching my dad's nose like that." "Willy-nilly," he said. It was an old joke. "I don't know if we'll find him. I don't think he's at the pub much, or if he's got a job. I saw him when I was buried, you know. He sent his ghosts in to find me." Others had talked about seeing visions, buried in the snow or caught in a car for 2 days on a country road. They said, more than one of them, that a long man had visited them. "It's not just me," he told Sarah. "No one knows why he doesn't help, he just looks." "Did he pinch their noses? This is the stuff we can find online, Dad." Yeah, maybe. Maybe. What about the stuff about cockroaches? How to get rid of them? I saw a huge one in the bathroom. They say they'll survive a nuclear war. That's what they reckon. He shivered. I hate them. He felt like a fraud. Life exhausted him. All of the people wanting what he had. And Cheryl and Sarah got nothing but harassment. Lucky your dad's alive, your husband, people said to them. Imagine what life would be like without him. How sad, how hard, making them think about it. All of these people wanted to talk to him, but they'd paid him at least, and kept him in beer and roast beef. Always the same questions. What is it that you think you were kept alive for? They asked, putting the onus on him to make something of his life. As if he'd been given a second chance and he'd be a fool to waste it. Don't know what I was kept alive for, but mostly I'm enjoying every extra minute with my daughter and my wife, was his stock answer. But he no longer really cared. They asked him, are you scared of anything? Seems like you're not. It was a stupid question, he thought. He wasn't scared. Cockroaches. I really hate cockroaches. The interviewer sighed in agreement. Another question they always asked him was, put in the same situation, would or could you do it again? Well, I won't, mate, will I? Just not going to happen. They always ended with, if only you could bottle it. His standard joke was to hold out his wrists. You want a litre or two? Go for it, I can spare it. It was all an act, and he was good at it. He was waiting in the queue to buy fish and chips. Aren't you that guy, that miner guy? When he smelt sour cherries, it took him straight back to the cave and the smell of the long man. He felt cold through his layers of clothing and did not want to turn around. He felt someone behind him, close, but people did that. They seemed to think that if they got physically close to him, they could absorb some of him, that they could be like him. He took his package of food and left the shop, eyes down, climbed into the car some sponsor had given him, sat there to eat it. The long man opened the passenger door and climbed in. Stuart dropped the food on his lap where it sat, greasy and hot. He barely felt it. He scrabbled for the door handle, but the long man took his wrist, pressed hard, and Stuart couldn't move, just like last time. You seem to be enjoying that fish, Stuart. You know what that tells me? That I didn't take it all. The fact that you want to eat tells me that. Stuart tried to shake his head to say, I'm faking, it's all fake, I can't feel a fucking thing. But the cockroaches were out, skittering and sucking, and he thought he was as cold as before. That was nothing. His eyelids felt frozen open, his nostrils had frozen shut. Everything was so painful, he wanted to stop doing it. That's it now, the long man said, picking cockroach feelers out of his teeth. You're done. Stuart sat slumped in his seat for a while and then started the car. A tape was playing, one of his interviews. He liked listening to himself, hearing his own voice. I'll do anything to stay alive, anything to keep my family alive, he heard himself say. You know how I got stuck in a pipe once when I was a kid? Fat kid I was. I sang songs from TV shows to keep me occupied. Listening from his car, chilled to the bone and tired, Stuart wondered if he'd even seen the long man then. If the long man had waited and waited until he was good and strong. He pulled out of the car park. It was his only sense of duty making him do it, long instilled. He had to go to a school visit someone had organised for him. Some school where there was a survivor kid, a young girl recently rescued. It took him a while to get there, wrong turns, bad traffic, angry traffic. He thought there was more road rage than usual, but wondered if it was his driving. If all that stuff about driving carefully did make sense, because he didn't care now, didn't care how he drove or what he hit. We'd like to welcome Stuart Parker to the school. He's taken time out of his busy day to talk to us and talk to Claire, our own hero. The children clapped quietly. Stuart guessed they were tired of hearing about Claire. She'd been trapped in the basement of a building, a game of hide-and-seek gone wrong, so no one knew she was playing. No one knew where she was. It took 6 days for them to find her. Tell us how you coped, Claire, the teacher said. I pretended I was at school doing boring work, and that's why it was so boring. Sometimes I thought about this nice man from the mine. He said. He kept thinking of nice things, and that's what I did too. The children shuffled, started to talk, bored. Claire looked at them wide-eyed. I ate bugs, lots of bugs, like he did, and I had some chips I took from the cupboard, but I didn't want to tell Mum and Dad because I thought I'd get into trouble. She had their attention, but not completely. And there was the creepy guy. You were alone in the basement, Claire, weren't you? The teacher said, passive-aggressive. No one there. Who did you see? Stuart asked. He hadn't had a chance to speak before then. What did he look like? The audience were rapt. They didn't often get to see adults this way, all head up and loud. I was all by myself, and then this creepy long guy was there. I'd never seen him before, but I thought he might help me to get out. But he didn't. He just stared at me. I told him he should go away, but the only thing I think he said was, "See you soon, Claire." That's why I'm scared. I really don't want to see him again. Stuart wanted to care, wanted to save her, but there was nothing left in him. Only the memory of the man who would have killed to save that girl, would have ripped the arms off any man who tried to hurt her. Just a memory, though. Stuart, we haven't heard from you. What can you tell the children? That there is no purpose in life, we all die, rot, and none of it is worth anything. You're only taking up space, and that the long man is real. You need to keep her safe from him because he'll destroy her. The principal, stunned and speechless, took a moment to answer. The children were silent, and he wondered if he'd laid seeds of sadness and emptiness in them all. He didn't mean to, but he was tired and too cold to lie anymore. But Mr. Parker, you're a role model. We asked you here to lift the children, inspire them. I'm nothing at all, he said. Claire was in the news, and so was he, with his awful statements, his cruelty to the children. He had the media at his door again, but they hated him now for turning on the children. You don't do that to the kiddies, do you? He watched Claire. She didn't look chilled to the bone, so he thought perhaps the long man hadn't come to her yet. His house was full of sponsors' food, and friends came over to eat it because he wouldn't. Some of the rescuers, too, looking at him as if they'd wasted their time. Sitting there in front of the television, warm rug, warm slippers, all skinny and pale. He couldn't even fake a smile anymore. His famous watch had slipped off his wrist and sat in the dust under the couch. We should have bottled it. We could have given him a taste of his own self, one of the rescuers said. He knew they were disappointed in him, that he wasn't doing what they wanted him to do. 3 days of my life I gave to save him, he heard one say in the kitchen. Now look at him. They left him alone, and he didn't care.